for our first speaker today. We have PJ. No, we have Gotham, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Okay, please welcome Gotham Reggae.
Good morning. All right. All the sober people in the house, good morning. And all the hungover people in the house, good morning. That's the good morning. Yeah. All right. So to begin day 2, we have PJ Hagerty. He wanted me to remember his name, so he actually wrote it. He had it printed on his T-shirt, right? So PJ is a great friend. I know him for like about 8 years. The first time I met him was when he came to Goa for a conference, and he gave a keynote completely hungover. And well, that happens in Goa. But interestingly, he's a speaker at a lot of conferences. He's a traveler. He is a musician, and he knows all about what a keynote is. In fact, his daughter, at the age of 11, gave a keynote at RubyConf in the US. So, he is the founder of DevRelate, which is into developer community relations. Currently, he's representing Engineered here. And PJ, happy wedding anniversary, man.
Thank you.
All right, over to you.
All right, so I'm gonna play some music here. It's part of the theme. Stick with me on this. We're gonna take a little journey here. So, as Gav said, my name is PJ. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you, Sam. Could we all be a little bit more like Sam? Good morning. All right. So this is called Pop Music and Programming for Fun and Profit, and it's gonna be pretty interesting. So let's set some ground rules. First of all, I'm not really supposed to be playing music live to people that I don't own, but that's okay. I'm here with Engineered. How many people know Engineered? How many people after this conference plan to deploy their apps on Engineered? You can do better than that. One thing Chris didn't mention, we are running a contest, the quiz. We will be announcing the winner after lunch, so if you haven't entered yet and gotten your t-shirt, do that now. This is some information about Engineered. I also have my own company called DevRelate.io, where we have all of these great clients. And if you are interested in any of them, let me know. I'm also throwing a conference in September in Buffalo, New York, sunny downtown Buffalo, New York. The CFP is open and tickets are available, so check that out at codedays.me. But enough about that. What are we going to talk about today? So Ruby's open source, and we love open source. We're going to talk a little bit about getting started and getting involved in open source. What it's like to work on a team, learning about that first job in the wacky world of Silicon Valley. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's a wonderful, wonderful, mythical place that everyone wants to go someday. I'm going to tell you a little story about myself being an open source evangelist and developer at an extremely large corporation that I will not name for legal reasons. Then we're going to talk about, once you've gained knowledge, once you have a little experience, how you share that with everybody else, and how you actually get up to the point of hitting the stage and making your own pop music. So the songs are going to go along with what I have to say, theoretically, if we time this right. Full disclosure, everybody, I have a very liberal idea of what constitutes pop music. Some call it the British idea. Anything that was ever popular once is considered pop music. So, yeah, that's kind of the idea. Popular music comes and goes, but at the same time, there's certain ones that stick with you, and certain ones that resonate. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start at a place we all know, in the beginning. In the beginning, it's always a little lonely. You're by yourself, you've got a computer, you know you want to do something with it. Maybe, you're going to go learn something. Maybe you're going to go to university and learn something. Maybe you're going to teach yourself. But in the beginning, it's you yourself. Even if you're going to a class, you're kind of all alone on this island. And that doesn't matter really whether you started when you were 10 years old because, your parents bought a computer and you thought it was really cool. And you started coding, BASIC because you had a book on it. Or if you went to a boot camp and learned it in 6 months because you're excited or you transitioned from another job. pretty cool thing. Computers are kind of amazing, but in the beginning, it's very lonely. You are all by yourself on an island. And if you are new to this journey, I want to say welcome to the community, welcome to the Ruby community, welcome to the coding community, welcome to the developer community, because we need to be open and welcome these new people. So how many people are new to coding here? No one. Okay. Put your hands up. You should be proud of yourself. But thank you for coming. So as time goes on, the one thing we realize, we all have passion. But your head fills up. You're starting to learn things at a rate that's like super high. And it's unbelievable. And you start to look like Frank here. Things are like really out of balance and you feel like your head's about to explode. You don't know whether you're chasing your tail or following your dreams or even what's happening or where to start. It's a big world. It's a huge world, the world of coding. How do you make the right decision? How do you figure it out? And I think the first thing you need to do is figure out how to tunnel that passion, focus on tunneling that passion and the pure spirit willing to get involved and turn it into a craft a little bit more. Learning how to code, to make things that are important, to do things that are important to you. That's where you start. A lot of people got into coding or developed their application because they had a pain point. Perfect example is Engine Yard. Engine Yard started years ago. I won't say how many, it's a question on the quiz. But it started years ago with 3 guys. And those 3 guys built Ruby applications. However, unless they built their own server, they had no place to put it. And they were like, this seems like a problem. What if we built something that was cool that we could deploy our applications on? Awesome. So they built it. And the one guy was like, I like trains. They're like, cool, we'll call it Engine Yard. Which totally doesn't describe what we do. But nonetheless, they fixed a pain point. That's what coding is all about. But you have to remember, the first place to start is, of course, the first place you start anywhere, whether it's athletics, sports, learning to play an instrument, whatever. What does every person who's teaching you something always say? Practice, practice, practice. This is my drum kit. Right after I bought new cymbals, so I was like really excited. I took a picture of it. It's a very expensive habit. I don't recommend it to anyone. But yeah, like when I first started playing drums, I was 6 years old. I would practice for 4 hours a day, much to my parents' chagrin. They were not thrilled to have a 6-year-old who could barely reach the foot pedals, pounding out a bunch of shit for 4 hours a day. I'm sure it was a headache, but I was a lovely child, regardless of what they might say. But yeah, you kind of, you feel, even though you've got your equipment, you're ready to go, you're practicing like you have these contraptions, this computer that seems to do whatever it wants. Why is it doing whatever it wants? I feel lost, I feel rudderless, I don't know what's going on. And I include this picture. This is a guy named Frank, not the same guy named Frank from the other big heady picture. Playing an instrument called the hurdy-gurdy. The hurdy-gurdy is a beyond weird instrument that doesn't make any sense and is very tough to play. But this guy's really cool. He plays and tells Norse mythology stories in northern Finland. Like that's what he does. And you feel that way, like when you look at something like that, you're like, oh, these are the experts. These people know what they're doing. But I don't know what that thing is, and I don't know how to do what he's doing. How do I do what he's doing? So you start looking for mentors. You form a band. You get a group of friends. You go to a meetup. Go to a conference. You meet some people who already know what they're doing, and you literally look at them and say, I want to do what you're doing. Can we do this together? This is pair programming. This is the beginning of forming a core group that you can understand. And you act locally. One of the easiest steps is to learn from the people that are already in your area. Unless you live somewhere remote, chances are you can find people. Even if you are remote, you can find people online, Slack channels, IRC is still a thing. Following people on Twitter and seeing what they're saying, reading blog posts. There's so many resources out there. So you form your own band. And part of this experience is specifically to gain more experience. You learn from the people that came before you. Now, does that mean like, oh, I'm new to Ruby and Rails, I'm gonna follow DHH and learn everything he has to tell? No. Don't. David's a nice man. I don't mean to besmirch his name. He did something wonderful for us, back in the early 2000s. I won't say that. Another question on the quiz. I'm catching myself a lot. There's things I'm supposed to say that I can't say. He did something amazing. But just because you follow someone on Twitter doesn't mean they ever talk about code anymore. So you form this band. You start to get the experience. It's time to get a job. Like it's time to move on and start making some money. So we start to look. We start to bring our skills to the workforce. And we know one thing. So we've been starting off as open source developers, learning, honing our craft, learning new things, practicing. And we know that startups love open source. Does anybody know why startups love open source? Because it's free. And when you're a startup, you might not have that much money. You might just have an idea and some time on your hands. So you start using open source. We can use all these things that we learned, all these things we picked up from our community and our band, and bring them into getting a job. And so we want to get a job in the most amazing place there is, which is, of course, Silicon Valley. And while you have that job, you still might be what they call a DIY developer, which means you're dedicated to open source, and the company you work for uses open source, and that's great. But they might not give you the time to work on open source. So you start to feel a little alone, and you might have to do it in your own time. So DIY, do it yourself. It's the punk rock ethos. That said, and I mean, this is a very serious thing, you should never feel compelled to, after a 40-hour work week, go out and work in open source just so you can improve your resume or look better when you fill out that next job application, a cooler CV. That's not what open source is about. It's not about burning you out until you can't do things anymore. It's about feeling good and giving back to a community. So do it at your level, whatever you're comfortable with. The community will accept you as long as you're making a positive contribution. I mean, if you're being a jerk, then no one's going to accept you. But nonetheless, if you're giving a 40-hour work week and then 40 hours contributing to open source, you're going to burn yourself out. It's going to be terrible. If that's your thing, cool, good for you, and more power to you. And if it's not, both are valid choices. You can do both. That said, you're still being given a great opportunity. Chances are you're not going to be the only person this startup hires. There will be other developers at your level. There'll be other developers a little bit higher than you, and then hopefully there'll be some experts, some people that have really been doing this for years and know what's up. Those are the people that are going to be your new mentors. They're going to help lead you. Jobs at startups are great places to take the skills that you started with and you've already developed and make them into something bigger. So you start as a junior, and your goal is to be a mid-level developer in the next couple years. That's realistic. Then maybe if the startup's doing really well, it doesn't fall over because they have too much VC capital, but I'm not going to get into that kind of politics. Maybe at some point you become a senior developer. Or maybe you mentor someone else who's coming in as a junior, and you realize, hey, I've learned all this stuff, and now I'm passing it on. This is so great. Working together on a product with a team is a great experience. There's a common goal. Not a good team. Everybody wants to help make that goal happen. They want to realize what's going on and bring their passion to the product. And the teamwork is key. So maybe you come in and your skills aren't quite as developed as the rest of the team. But if it's a good team, they're going to help you develop those skills. That's what they want. They want a better team. They want a better product. They want people to look at them and say, this person is good and the company they work for is good. Now, this has not always been my experience at every company I've ever worked for. When I was at Engineering, I'll tell you right now, one of the best teams I ever worked for was the support team. I worked in support, I worked in engineering, I worked on the community team. The support team was one of the most amazing groups I've ever worked in. There's a couple of support team members here, Mekong and Rad are here. And they know that it was about one team, one goal. We wanted to be the best. And so we would always support each other. Before that, I worked at a place that was not so great, where it was more about sniping people and trying to make their code snippets look bad, comments, lots of Git blames that were literal blames. And that's a toxic environment where you don't learn so well. So if you find yourself in a toxic environment, the best thing to do is to find a new environment to be in. We're lucky in this community. People are nice in the Ruby community. Jobs are plentiful. We strive to be inclusive and diverse as much as we can. We still have work to do. I fully admit that. But not just in people. We have a diversity of ideas in this community. I think communities like ours helped shape the way Silicon Valley is now. It's not so much a money grab as it is a let's make the world a better place. I hope. So I guess in some ways the kids really are all right. So let's talk about open source in the big corporate world. So as I mentioned, I worked in open source for a while, and I worked in startups for a while. And a couple years ago, I went to work for a big company. I won't say what company that is, for legal reasons. And it was interesting. They were like, we really want you to come and join us and be our open source evangelist. And I was like, wow, this is great. I'm so happy that this company is doing open source. This is really exciting. You're so huge. I didn't think this was a thing you did. And they were like, no, it's great. Come join us. I quickly found that the stable ground I thought I was moving on by being at a big stable company was actually quicksand. At first, everything went well. Things were familiar. They were like, yeah, cool, you do you. You go to conferences and talk. About what? About the product? No, talk about open source. That's what we want. Just make sure you're wearing the t-shirt. Okay, cool. And I do that, and I realized I was kind of on an island by myself until I come back and be like, hey everybody, listen, I just learned this about our product. People are saying this. Like, we should maybe look into fixing this a little bit. It might be better if we did this. They'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever. We don't really care. We just want you to be out there talking about how you do open source and work for us. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So it was pretty clear I didn't fit in. I didn't belong there. And don't get me wrong, this is not a rant about anti-capitalism or anything like that. This is just about how some companies are fine with presenting that they're giving back something when in reality, they're just trying to make a buck off of it. And it's not always obvious at first. When you use open source, you get something for free. We've talked about that with startups. More or less, there's no charge. So giving back is inherent. It's something you need to do. At this particular company, I couldn't so much as publish a gem that helped make their product better for the Ruby community without going through 6 months with legal, going through several contract and documentation issues, and then being told by the time this actually finished, I was no longer with the company, and I didn't even care about the gem. Anything that you produce for open source had to go through this process, and it was like, by the time this comes out, there's a different version of Ruby and no one cares anymore. Why am I wasting my time? So it became obvious where the problem was. I sold out. I sold out for a paycheck. I sold out for stability, good health insurance, because it's the United States and that's a tricky thing. I gave in on my ideas in order to make money and feel like I had a stable ground there. Startups can be dangerous. I worked at a startup once for 1 month where the founder just came in and was like, it's not meeting my vision, we're done here. Fired everybody. That's a concern you have to have. It doesn't happen too often, but it does happen. So I realized after a while, like it was destroying my passion for open source, it was destroying my passion for coding. Didn't want to be involved. Didn't want to speak at conferences and look like a shill for some company that I didn't want to bother with. So I realized at one time it was time to take the control back, take the power back, get back into what I was doing and tell my bosses to shove it up their ass. So I left corporate open source. This is the point. After time, you begin to know what you like. You've developed your skills. You've had a couple of jobs. You know what you're comfortable with. You know how you like to work. Some people like to work in an office. Some people like to work remote. Some people like a combination, co-working facilities, whatever. You know where you get your code done. Some people are best from like 10 at night till 4 in the morning. Good for them. And when you're working on your code, it's like listening to great music. Like it starts to like lock in and really make you feel great. And when you listen to bad music, it makes you feel crappy and you don't want to do anything. And coding is the same way. It's still a learning moment. Working at this company was one of the best learning moments I ever had. I learned that it's possible to stay involved in open source, even in a place where the main goal is to make money. But I need to be myself. I need to remain PJ as much as I possibly can. So let's figure out how we get more involved after all this. We make music, which is our code. It's our own code. We control what it is and what we want to see in the community by creating what we think the community needs, or what our customers need if we're working on a specific product. But we create things. We're being creative. We release our independent album of this cool gem that does this cool thing that nobody thought of before. We write blog posts so other people can learn from what we've learned. Like, hey, I was installing Nokogiri and had 18,000 problems. Let me explain to you why. We continue to give back. We find ways to keep the ball spinning. Now, here's the thing. When we start creating open source code, not just for our products, but for the community, we need to know that not everyone is going to love, need, or want what it is that we're making. This is key. Simply because you release some tools or some code that helps with a problem you spotted or that your company did doesn't mean everyone else feels the same way. And I say this because a lot of people are like, cool, I wrote this code, I wrote this tool, I wrote this gem, I'm going to open source it. And the community will then, maintain it for me and help me out. No, that's not how it works. It could be that your case was so specific, nobody really needed it as much as you thought they did. It could be that you're just not good at getting the message out. And I'll give you a couple examples. So we have Rails. You've heard of Rails, right? I'm pretty sure we've all heard of Rails. But a few years ago, I want to say like 10 or 12 years ago, some folks wanted other things. They wanted some things Rails couldn't do. So they broke off from the Rails core team and they created Merb. Merb was pretty cool. It did a lot of things, but there was a lot of politics and contention. The Rails core team didn't like the Merb core team because why are they going off? Now, luckily, this is a situation that ended well. When Rails 3 came along, and I know that's really outdated, but Rails 3, they merged what was going on in Merb with what was going on in Rails and made a great thing, and the community benefited. We all benefited from that. Otherwise, it would have been the David Heinemeier Hansen show of Rails. We don't always win as a community. And I'll give you an example. A long time ago, I was working in a company, and there was a young man called Wayne. And Wayne really wanted a way to manage the different versions of Ruby on his computer, so he created RVM. RVM was like the ipso facto version manager for Ruby, hands down for a long time. And I know because he put it on my computer first and it didn't work. If you ever met Wayne, that's pretty classic Wayne. A few years later, 5 years into RVM, someone was like, I don't like what this does. Instead of forking RVM and fixing it to do it the way they wanted it, they created RVM. And then went on a shitposting storm tirade where they wrote as many blog posts as they could about how bad RVM was. That's not what a community does. That's not helpful. So you have a choice. You can code responsibly and be a good community member, or you can be an asshole. It happens. The point is, make good code. Without exception. Don't expect it to take off. Don't expect it to be super powerful, super awesome. Don't expect to be the new rock star, the new Ruby hero. That might not happen. We have a bunch of frameworks that aren't Rails that we can use with Ruby, and that's awesome. We have Sinatra and Hanami and Trailblazer. There's also projects like Cuba that were great once, but no one ever maintained them because they didn't really need them. So understand that if the code's not up to par, the community's not going to adopt it. Make sure your code is something to write home about. Make sure if you are solid and you've done what you need to do, you have a good framework, a good license, and you're working with the community and getting the word out there, you still have things to talk about. Once you have things to talk about, you need to let people know. And listen, I know not everybody wants to be me. You should want to be me. My life is pretty damn awesome. But not everybody wants to be up on stage talking about code or talking about community or talking about anything. Some people don't want to bother at all. It is, however, a great way to get people involved. And remember, in the beginning, that was you. You weren't involved. You didn't know what was going on. You were hoping someone would take the stage and share a little bit of knowledge. You're hoping for the best. But now you're the leader. You have to find a way to mentor people, to get the word out there and share your knowledge. It's not always about being a superstar. You don't need a microphone and a band and be up on stage with lights and getting the word out there. Taking the stage can also be tweeting about projects, getting involved in GitHub PRs, chatting with people in forums, hanging out at meetups so people know you're available. Like, oh, we know every Tuesday Chris is going to be there to talk to me about his project. Awesome. Go to Stack Overflow, hang out in Slack channels. Work with the community to make things better. You're involved, you created things, and you have some knowledge. The best way to be appreciated is to appreciate the community too. So it's all about banding together, gathering like-minded people, working towards a common goal. Some of what we talked about is a bit general, and I'm happy to be more specific if people want answers. But it's kind of hard to take into account every factor of every person's experience. Like I mentioned, we all come from different backgrounds. We all came to code from a different place. So our journeys are each individual journeys, but also a community journey, and you have to find the middle ground to understand where someone's coming from. At some point, you'll reach the level of respect for the community that will bring the respect right back to you. You'll be a contributor, a coder, a mentor, a community member, a leader. In essence, everything you'd hoped that you would get when you first looked at a computer and said, I need to know more about this. I need to be involved. So, this is the playlist that's been playing in the background. Some of you might have recognized some of the songs, some are more obscure, but they kind of went with the theme. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we're having a good time. I do have to ask everyone a favor. Also, the link is practically invisible, so I will tweet it out later. But I do have to ask everyone in the audience a favor. As Gautam mentioned, today is my wedding anniversary. I've been married for 18 years. I'm smart. I got married on St. Patrick's Day. My real name is Patrick. And I got married in 2000, so I know it's been 18 years. This is what you should do when you code. Think ahead so you don't forget things. But obviously my wife, the most patient woman in the world. For those of you who know me, I can be a bit obnoxious sometimes. She kindly said, no problem, go to the Philippines, make those people happy. We'll celebrate when you get back. So, if everyone could just pull up your Twitter and add Hagerty B, that's my wife, her name is Billy. Hagerty B, happy anniversary from RubyConfPH. I would greatly appreciate it. She's gonna be home in a few minutes, and for her phone to blow up, I think would be the best thing. So if you guys could do that for me, if everyone could do that for me, that would be fantastic, and I thank you so much. So, is it time for karaoke yet? Thank you very much, everybody. I think we have time for questions, but I also totally understand if you don't have any. Oh, and this last song's not on the playlist. Go back to that. Yeah, so this last song I added because it is St. Patrick's Day, which is also known in my house as St. PJ's Day. I'm not a saint, but hey, everybody's Irish today, right? Hence my outfit. If you thought I was just trying to look as cool as Sam Pippin, that was not actually the goal, but I do. But, you know. But yeah, so tonight at karaoke, it's whiskey for everybody. Streams of whiskey tonight. Nope. I'm drinking.
But it's your day, it's St. Patrick's.
It is my day, so everyone should be buying me drinks. Any questions at all? If not, I'll be hanging out at the engineer table. Feel free to stop by. And thank you very much, everybody.